Hi everyone, my name is Dominic Arojado. I'm a web developer, and these are guides, tips, and tricks to web development. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a OTP input in React and TypeScript, and also learn how to write tests for it using JS and testing library. So OTP inputs is basically the most common way to verify a user if they really own that email or, for example, mobile phone. So I've seen a lot of OTP inputs out there. So some are like just one input box, some are in separate input boxes. So it's an input group, and you can type 1 digit per input box. So I use a lot of them, and some of them doesn't give me the great user experience. That's because they're not following the best practices on how to create an OTP input. So for example, I am prompted with an OTP in a mobile phone. I press in one of the input box, and when it focuses, it will show the keyboard, but eventually it will just show the alphabet keyboard, and that's not really good if your OTP only supports digits, right? You don't need to show the alphabet. So that's one. Second one thing is, for example, I'm using a iOS. I'm not sure if Android does this, but in iOS, if you receive an SMS, it should suggest in the keyboard the code that you need to fill in. And once you press that suggestion, it will automatically fill in the code in the input boxes. But then some web applications don't. They actually don't suggest it, or if they do, if you press the suggestion, it will not fill in the rest of the input box. It will just fill in the first input box, which is again, not a great user experience. And for lastly, for example, it's also a separate input boxes. If I type in one of the digits, it should automatically focus to the next input box. And again, some web applications don't do that. So I'm a little bit frustrated of how some of the input boxes were implemented. So this is why I created this video to, share what I think how it should be done. It may not be the perfect solution, but I hope it helps developers out there to know what are the considerations and best practices when building this OTP input. All right, so I'm going to show you later what it will look like. And yeah, I think let's start. All right, so this is what an OTP input I'm talking about. So it's not just a one input box, because if we do that, then this video would be shorter, and where's the challenge in that? So we're implementing the OTP input in separate input boxes. Each of them will be 1 digit per box. So I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see it automatically focuses to the next input box. And then I can also delete it. So I'll delete the first one. It's still here. And then if I do another delete or pressing the backspace, it will focus and delete the previous element, and it will do so again. And I can also paste my code right here. So I'm just going to copy this, and I can paste it anywhere. I can paste it here. Let's delete that again. I can paste it at the left, and it will still work. And lastly, I can also go through each of them using my arrow keys. So I'm pressing left key right now. I'm pressing right key. I'm pressing down key. I'm pressing up key. All right. So this is what we're going to build by the end of this video. And yeah, I guess we can start. A couple of assumptions right here is that you know a little bit of web development basics and concepts, and you know React and CSS, HTML. But if you're new to TypeScript or writing tests in JS and testing library, then I will make this a beginner-friendly video. So don't worry about that. But as long as you know the concepts of React, then I think you'll be fine. So the fastest way to get started with React and TypeScript, they have a template here that you can use. So let's copy this script to create the Create React app. So it's the officially supported way to get started with React. So you just copy that code and replace this with the project name that you want. So I'm going to use React TypeScript OTP input. So I actually already run this before to make this video quick. So once you press that, just quickly open your project in your terminal. So I'm using Visual Studio Code as my IDE. You can use that as well because I'm using extension right here, which is Prettier. It's a code formatter to help us format our code, and it saves us time. And I also have the React ES7, so it helps me. It provides snippets for me to use, so that it also helps me to write code faster. And for the Prettier, there's settings that you need to do in .vs Code settings JSON and the configuration. So feel free to use that as well. Okay, so I guess let's test whether this is working fine first. You can do that with yarn start, which is one of the scripts in the package.json. So yarn start. This will start the development setup for your React app. All right, so it's running fine. Everything, that means this is working. So now we can do some cleanup. So I'm just going to delete the contents of app.css, delete the tests. All right. Then we don't need the code right here. And we can do an asterisk box sizing. We want it to be border box so that our width and height are always followed strictly. And we don't need the logo as well. So in the app component, we can make it empty first and replace the class name as container. I'm just going to change this like this. You don't need the logo. And yeah, let's see if everything's still working fine. I'm refreshing the page, and yeah. So the next thing we need to do is basically create our component. So normally I like to put all the components I create in a components folder. So we just need one component, which is the OTP input. So because this is in TypeScript, our convention in file name for React JSX is TSX, so TypeScript JSX. And I'm using a snippet right here to create a React functional component using that VS Code extension that I installed. So in here, I'm just going to be adding class name OTP group. And then, yeah, let's start with this. I'm going to go back to the app.css. I'm basically going to style the container. So width will be 100px, max width will be 100% for mobile. I want the margin to be 0 auto, and padding to be 20px and 15. So that's it for the container. And yeah, let's go back to the OTP input. What do we need to do now? So basically in this input box, if we refer back to our final code, we need to display 6 input boxes. So what we can do, we can hard code this first to make it easier for us to see. So we have 6 elements in this array, and we can loop it. So this is how we loop in React. Basically, this will be the value or the digit, and you can also get the index from the loop. And we just need to basically loop in the key. We're gonna use index as the key. This is needed for React to know what it will be like the ID of each element. All right, so if we go back to our input box here, nothing is displayed yet because we haven't imported it yet. But we can continue. So what does this input box need to be? So first, we need to add in the type. So it might seem intuitive if you use input type number, because anyway, we are only typing in digits. But the problem with this, maybe I'll just import it here first. OTP input just to show you. Problem with using type number is that you'll get these arrow keys, which helps you to increase or decrease the number. And that's one thing, we actually don't need these arrows because we're typing in the code. And yeah, that's mainly it. And we don't want that. And it's usually used for, incremental values, not numbers for an OTP code. It's used really for numbers like working with money or, quantity. And our codes are not in quantity, they are like string digits. So that's one thing. So I don't suggest using number. And some websites before actually use telephone. So the problem with telephone is that it supports asterisk and hashtag. And again, we don't want that. We don't need to support that. So we're going to use text. But in text, if you focus on this in mobile, it will actually show you the alphabet keyboard. And there's a way to resolve that. You're basically using input mode numeric. Basically, when you pass this attribute to the input, it will basically show the number keyboard instead of the alphabet. So this is what we need. So type text and input mode numeric. So what's the next thing we need to add? Is the autocomplete. So this attribute is really important because this is how it will automatically suggest to you the input, the one-time code in your keyboard. This is how iOS does it. I'm not sure if Android already does this, but it's good to already support this in your OTP input box. So this will be one-time code. So autocomplete actually has different kinds of value you can pass. And as you search down or you scroll down, you can see the one-time code right here. So you see, it's used for verifying user identity. This is what we need. So I highly suggest to add this so that it gives a great user experience for those using iOS. And eventually, I think other OS will support this. Okay, what's next for this is the pattern. So patterns accepts regular expressions. So it's a JavaScript term for, regular expressions. For, basically the pattern of the character. So in our input box, we basically support digits and only one digit per box. So how can we do this? So in regular expression, we have this /d, which means it should be a digit, and we can put a curly brace and add 1. So this means that it should be a digit and it should have a length of 1. This is what we need for the pattern. So what is this for actually? So it's, for example, if you wrap this OTP input in a form, this will basically help the browser to enforce that pattern. So for example, that form is submitted. It will check whether the pattern is followed. If it's not, it will show like a browser error. So that is really helpful, enforcing the form validation. So what's next? So max length. Max length, it will be it may seem intuitive if we put 1, but I'm not going to do 1 here. I'm going to use the value length, which is what we're going to get from the props. So this means that, for example, we have 6 input box, the max length would be 6. Why am I doing that? Because we are going to allow pasting of the digits in any of the input box. And we need at least 6, or depending on how many boxes we are going to support in order to get the whole value in the input. So that's why it's max length. And don't worry if suddenly there's 6 characters in one box. That won't happen because we have the logic later to always prevent that. So we'll just leave this as 6 for now. And what's next? So we need to add a class name here, which is going to be OTP input. So OTP group, OTP input. We can style this later. And let's just leave that for now. Let's add the styles for this input. So I create a CSS file and I'm going to import it. What do we need to do? So the OTP group will be displayed in flex so that there one row side by side. We want the width to be 100%, max width to be maybe 260. Then we can add a column gap. So the gap between the input boxes will be 10. Okay, so how about the input? We want it to be 100% width. We'll basically just follow the OTP grid. And if there's many input box, then it will divide the width depending on the parent container. Height will be 60px. Border will be like something grayish. Border radius 5px. Pixels. Text align. We want it to be center. Font size to be 32 pixels. Line height to be 1. And font rate, maybe let's make it as 700 or bold. Okay, let's see what. Okay, now you can see that it looks like the React OTP input that we have right here. Maybe let's just add the title on the top. React TypeScript OTP input. All right, so you can see it looks just exactly the same. Now, what you need to do is basically add the props for this OTP input. So if you're new to TypeScript, this is how you define or initialize an object props. So props are basically objects that you can pass into the component. So you can actually do it like this. So you add a colon props, and what does this props contain, or what should it accept? So it should accept a value. So this will be a string. So if we didn't pass anything, you can see that TypeScript is already doing its work. It's basically saying that value is missing in the props. So that's why TypeScript is really helpful on catching bugs early on. So we'll worry about it later. Let's just define the rest of the props. So next props that we need to add is the value length. So how many input box are you going to be supporting? So here we're going to support 6. So but then we want it to be reusable. So we're gonna depend on the value length to display how many input boxes are there. And then lastly will be the onChange. And the onChange will be a function that accepts an argument value string. So because our value here is a string, it should also be a string. This will basically help us update the parent state outside of the input. So if the value changes, and then that is how it's going to display the value in the individual input boxes. So I think this is it for our props. So you just written your first TypeScript code. So now let's try to solve the error of the TypeScript. So you can add a state here, maybe OTP, and then set OTP. Let's just leave it as an empty string for now. Import it from React, and for the onChange, basically just get the value string, set the OTP with the value. All right, so I think we can now pass it here. Value will be the OTP. Value length, we can put it as 6. OnChange is going to be the onChange. So now there's no more TypeScript error because we have satisfied the props. Because this is a string, this is a number, this is a function that accepts value as a string. And we can set the OTP to update the state. So yeah, let's see what happens. Okay. So in the input box, we can actually add the value here. This will be the digit. So this is going to display 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the input boxes. All right. Great. So what do we need to do next? So we want to basically change this hard-coded array into an array depending on the value. So for example, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then it should display, we should construct an array that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So same goes for 6, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. it will be something like this. All right, so how do we do this? So actually it's very easy to basically just use dot split. It's a JavaScript string method. So it will basically convert anything that is empty space. So anything as empty space is in between these numbers. So it will convert into an array. But then again, what if we just have 3 string? We still want the array to be a length of 6. It should be like 1, 2, 3. Then maybe this is an empty space. This is because we want to still display 6 input box, but not all of them will be filled in. So how do we achieve this? So let's get into the code. You can actually basically use memo. So it's one of the React hooks features, which basically helps you calculate, do your calculation with a dependency. So our dependency right here will be value and value length. So anytime either of these two changes, the use memo will be updated. So this will be the value array, or maybe value items. I'm going to use memo from React, import it from React, and the dependency will be value and value length. So what do we need to do here? So basically we need to construct an array from value, and it should still, the array should have a length equal to value length. Okay. So how do we construct this? So first, let's basically create that array or initialize that array. So when you hover on this array, you basically say it's an array of any. So basically it doesn't have, the type could be anything. And that's not really helpful for TypeScript. Later on, you face an issue saying that you need to provide the type. So what we can do here is basically help TypeScript to define the correct type for this array. This will be an array of string. So now if you hover onto it, it will be an array of string. Now what we need to do, we can return this array, then we need to construct the array here. So we can do a loop, basically simple loop, to basically loop until the value length, right? And we can also get the value to get the value array. Split this, remember we can split it. And basically when we loop in, we can get the character or the digit. Maybe use digit. Or maybe character first, because it's not, we don't know if it's a digit or not. Okay, so every time we loop, we basically access this value array. So we can be like 1, 2, 3. All right, so once we reach like 4, 5, 6, it's gonna be undefined. So we can do like, if car is there, then we push it to the array. If it's not, then we just push an empty string. This way, we can always have an array that is equal to the value length. And we can do more here. We can basically check whether the value or the character is a digit. And I mentioned this earlier, we can use the JavaScript regular expression to basically check whether this character is a number. I know you might be thinking, why not we just use type of is equal to number? That's because none is also a number. We can have a better way of checking this. We can basically use JavaScript expression. So manual regex. So using what we learned earlier, /digit means that it should be a digit. And we need to add a couple more things. Basically, it should begin. So this one should begin and this should end. Basically, this means that it should end. So this whole regex basically means that it should be a digit from any from the whole string itself. So from the beginning to the end, it should be a digit in the middle as well. So using this, you can do a test. And if this is true, means that is a number. If it's not, then we just push an empty string to the constructed array. So now we have constructed an array. We can basically now replace the hard-coded array with the value items. Let's see if this works. So when we refresh it, we get a 1, 2, 3. So it actually works now. You see that it fills in 1, 2, 3, but keeps the still displays the other input boxes, but unfilled. So let's try this again. Let's replace the state to 65421, and there you go. It still works. 1, 1, 1, and there you go. So even though the string is 4 in length, it still displays 6 input box, and you can even reduce the input box to make it or increase it to 7, and there you go. It still works. We want 10 input box. All right. Let's just revert that to 6 again and keep this as empty. You see that it's empty, it's still displaying 6 input box. All right, so what do we need to do next? Now we can handle the typing. As you can see, if I type, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't change the input box. So we need to handle it. So in this case, we can add a event listener right here. So input on change. And we can pass it here on change. So in React, is actually a change event handler. So in order to access the event, we need to pass in the type as well. So we can add change event and then the type of the element. So this is a HTML input element. You can just pass it as the argument right here. This is how you can access the event data and pass in the correct type for that event data. So for example, you add in a different type here, you see that it causes an error because this input element doesn't meet the type that you have defined. So it is not an anchor tag, it's an input element. So we need to change that to fix that. All right, so what we need to do now is basically get the value from the target. So we can get the target from e.target, and target value should be target value. And yeah, we won't be allowing anything that's not a digit. So A, B, C, D, E are not digits. We can do a check here. So target value using the same one. So since we're reusing it, I'm going to be extracting this and create a constants.ps. Create a constant variable here. So regular expression for digit will be this one. So now we can import it here. Digit. Now I can use the same our digit test target value. This is a digit. This would be true. So we need it to have a exclamation point, which is not true, and return it. So anything that's not a digit, we won't do anything. But if it's a digit, we basically have to construct the array. So for example, let me show you. For example, we replace 3 right here. We need the other input or digits to remain the same. So basically, we're replacing the string, which is in the middle, or either whichever input boxes I am. So basically, I have to keep the positions of these digits. So how do I do that? So since this is a loop, we basically have access to the index. Index basically is the position of the element in the array. So what we can do here is basically replace it with an anonymous function. pass in the event and the index. So now if I try to pass an index, it will throw an error because we don't support that in the argument. Again, one of the benefits of TypeScript, we catch early errors right away. So now I have the access to the index of the input box. What can I do with it? So we can basically use substring. So to explain substring, basically you can access a part of a string using the index. So for example, 1, 4. Let's use this as an example. So if I put index 0 to 4, he will get h and until here, like hell. You see, I run it, I get the hell. So if I just put the number 3 here without the second argument, I will basically get, so from index 3 to the rest. So let's say, let's make this 5. Again, I get from index 5 to the rest, like until the end. So we're going to use this to basically construct. So first of all, we already have the index that we're going to replace. Basically, let's construct the new string. For example, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 string here, and I'm index 3. So the 3 here is index 0, 1, 2. So it's in index 2. We basically need to get 1 and 2 first. To get 1 and 2, we basically start from 0 and the index. That's how we get 1 to 2. And then we need to get 4, 5, 6. So what we need to do is basically substring again, but just the first argument. And that will be index plus 1. So we added plus 1 here because we're going to put the new value in the middle. So we can now replace it with something else like 6 or 1 or 9, 0, 9. This is how we construct the string. So in case you get confused, we can just test this right away. So let me just change this. So we haven't deconstruct the props. Okay, so now the string will get updated on change. That's because on the parent element, we have the on change here and it will set the OTP. So let's start with an empty string and let's test this. So let me type 1. Oh, there you go. As you see, if I type other digits, it goes to the other input box, but my focus stays on this particular input box which I started. So we can fix this by basically getting the next element beside it so that it will focus to the next, and then you type in, you get this you get this experience. So how do you do that? Let's get the next input element or the next element sibling. And we can get that from the target. So target the next element sibling. And then if it does exist, because for example, you're here, nothing is beside it anymore, like next to it. So it may cause an issue if we execute a certain function that doesn't exist. So we need to do a check here. So if it does exist, we want to focus on it. Okay, so we get a TypeScript error right here. Focus function does not exist in element because this, when you hover on the next element sibling, it only displays element or null. It doesn't know what type of element it is. So some elements doesn't have the focus function. So we need to help TypeScript right here. So this is called type assertion. So when you know more than TypeScript, you basically help TypeScript to define the type. So this is using the as keyword. You basically put it is an input element or it is null. So now the error is gone because we help TypeScript to define or replace the correct type. So now it is HTML input element or null. Great. So now let's test this out. Let me replace it with an empty string. Okay, so I type some digits, and as you can see, it focused to the next input, which is great. So it's almost looking like an OTP input. Now what we need to do, we basically cannot delete. So let's handle that. I cannot delete anything. I'm pressing backspace, but it doesn't let me delete this digit. So how can we do that? So if we go back to our input on change, we're basically checking if it's a digit. And empty string is not a digit. So it will not run anything or not do anything at all. So we can actually allow that so that we can handle the deletion part. So if it's not a digit and it's not a empty string, then we don't allow that. But if it's a empty string, then we allow that. And also, if we gonna replace something in the string in the middle, we cannot use an empty string. We need to basically use something that's not a digit so that it will remain empty or unfilled. So for example, we delete something here, we need the rest of the digits to remain in the input box. So their position shouldn't change. So how do we do that? We basically can replace the empty string with a space. So this is what I'm going to do. So if target is a digit, so we can create a constant here. If target value a digit. So if it's a digit, then we just use the same value. But if it's not, then we're going to use empty space. So to visualize this, basically, we have this array, right? We replace, we have this string, right? And it converts to an array. If we replace 3, our logic, this in the above, we basically make it this like this. Means the other number shifted to the right, and this is not what we want. We want it to keep the position right here and just replace this with a space. So that's why we added it with a space, because once it goes to this logic, it will become an empty space. So that's fine. As long as there's a character that can split them correctly to their own position, then that's why we're using the empty space. So I hope that explains it. So maybe we can test this out. And just to add a logic here, we don't want it to focus to the next element if we're deleting it. So we're going to add is target not a digit, then we just return it. So it only focus on if we added something or we input a digit. If we're deleting it, we shouldn't focus to the next element. So let's test this out. I'm going to refresh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to delete. There you go. It works. I cannot delete. I can delete in the middle. As you can see, 4, 5, 6 is still remain intact. Same for 1, 2 as well. I can delete this as well. And yeah, everything is still intact. So that's what we want. So are we done yet? No, we can still improve this OTP input. So basically when we delete, you see I'm pressing delete again, but I'm expecting to delete the previous elements. So how can we handle it? Actually, when we delete, right, after the deletion, the on change doesn't trigger anymore because you're not changing anything in this particular input element. So that won't get triggered. So we need to rely on input keydown. So this is one of the keyboard events. And we can attach it here. On key down. All right. So again, we can add the type for the event data. Key down keyboard event. It will be a keyboard event from React. And we can add an argument that it is an input element. All right. We start with the value first. onTarget.value. So let's see what does it do. So we cannot get the target because the type of the target is an event target. Again, we can help TypeScript right here. We know that the target is a HTML input. So once you replace this, now the error is gone. And in input key down, we can actually access the key. So basically, what key in the keyboard are you pressing? It could be a backspace, arrow keys. So that will give us that data. So let's see what happens. I'm going to open my console right here from Google Chrome. You can use inspect to show that. And yeah, let's type in right here. As you can see, the key here is 6. And I press something again, meta. I'm going to press backspace. As you can see, backspace was there. And it still gives me the 6 as the value before that change happened. So now I'm going to press backspace again. As you can see, it is now empty. So basically what we want to do is, if we have a value in here, the focus would remain here. We don't want to focus to the previous element. It's because we might be changing the value only in this input box, not the previous one. So that's why we want to remain here. For example, I actually input the wrong digit in the last. So I'm just deleting this one. But after this, if I want to press backspace again, I should delete this previous element because I want to go back and fix maybe somewhere 4 or 5 are wrong. So how can we do this? So as you can see, if it's empty, then that's what we want to do. So basically we can add a logic here. If it's not a backspace or the target net value is not empty, we don't want to do anything. So we are returning it. So we are returning from here. But if it is the backspace and the value is not empty, then we can do focus to the previous element. So this will just be the opposite of next sibling, previous element sibling. All right. So now we can do this. Let's try this out. I type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I delete. I'm still here. I delete again. Boom. Nice. That is working like this. Great. So it's the same as what we are going to accomplish. Now what do we do next? What do we do next? So what we can do is basically the selection. So for example, I have these digits right here. I want to replace 3. So sometimes if I type it on the right cursor, you see that the cursor can be either on the left or be either on the right. If I'm on the right side or the cursor is on the right side, if I press a digit, it should replace 3, but then it replaced this digit. And as you can see, the rest of the numbers move. And that is not actually correct. Basically, what we want to do, if we press on 3, we want to replace it with a different number, not the next element. So how do we fix that? We can basically add a input on focus. So basically, when we click on it, this is on focus. So on that event, we want to select the 3. So you see, if I'm selecting and I change the number, it is working correctly. So I focus here, I change this, boom. So it's not moving any of the input boxes. It's basically just replacing that particular input box. And boom, I do a selection, boom. How do we do this? So in JavaScript, you have this function that you can do a selection, like how I selected this. Like you see that blue highlight, that is called a selection. So you can use set select range. I'm going to show you in a bit. So this will be again a React event, focus event of the input element, and we can get the target and the target that set selection range. So this is how we select. So it accepts the start and the end index So we start from 0 and we just basically target value that length. So I can use this or I can use 1 because I know it's always 1 digit per input box. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And let's see what happens. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I focus on this. As you can see, it automatically selected the input box. And I select here, and there you go. So sometimes it doesn't work. So as a precaution, we want to add this same logic in the target when we do the key down event. So where can we add that? We can add it here. So we can maybe use we can create a target that value here since this is repeated 2 times. All right. And yeah, we can add it here just to keep the selection range position. So even though it changed it here, we know that behind it, it will always select once we type a digit. So this is replacing digits. Must type, or for example, that selection is gone. When you type, it still remains the same. So let's see how does it work now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I replace this. Boom, it still works. And for example, the selection is gone. Okay, it still works. So you see, I replace it with 2 booms. So it still works. So our OTP input is working as fine now. I can replace this with 4, 5, 4. I want to repeat from the start, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it works. All right, so what else can we do here? So let's handle the paste event. So for example, I want to paste it here. You see that it doesn't work as correctly. It does change the inputs, but it's not working as what we expect. So for example, I want to paste something here. On the start, it's correct. But if we want to paste it here, it's still not working as correctly. You see that it moves all of the elements push back, but we want to replace the whole thing. So what can we do? So I'm not going to change. I'm not going to add another event listener here, like on paste. We're not going to do that because on change actually is already triggered once that the paste event happens as well. So what we can do is basically check the length. So I also don't want to support, pasting of, for example, I'm just copying a 4-digit code, but this is a 6-digit code. If I paste, that shouldn't do anything because that is not the code that we want. We want a 6-digit code. So what I think is the best practice is basically if we copy a 6-digit code and that is allowed for the handling of the paste event. If it's not, then we won't do anything. I think that's what makes more sense. So what we can check, so if we're here, let's see it's a digit and it's not, is it empty or not empty? As long as it's a digit, we can check the target value length. So from this point, target value could be 1, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because it is a digit, but we're not doing the checks here. So we're doing the check here to check the length. So target value length is 1. So this is a 1-digit. We're not doing pasting. So you can copy paste this and do just that. Okay, but if it's target value length, so the length of the new character is the same as the value length, then we do the paste here. So it's actually just very easy. You can just call the on change and pass in the target value, because target value is the 6-digit code that the user or the user has copied. And after we do the paste, we can just basically do a target.blur. So it's the opposite of focus, because most likely on, for example, mobile, right? You do a paste, you're most likely going to submit the code. So you don't need the keyboard anymore. So we are going to do the blur. So I forgot something right here. So on the paste event, we want to basically trim the value. Because, for example, users, when they receive the OTP input on, the OTP digit codes on the email platform that they're using, they might copy with an extra space on the right, or it may be on the left. And we just want to make it want to give them a better user experience by basically removing those. And it's still a 6-digit code, so this pasting event would still happen because it's equal length with the value length. So yeah, I just forgot to add this a while ago, so please add it in your code as well. All right, so let's see if this works. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to paste it maybe in the middle. Boom, it replaced everything and it blurred out, so I can immediately just submit the code. So let's try this again. I paste it in the first input box, and there you go. It still works. Again, let's try this. I'm going to paste at the last input box, and there you go. You replace everything. So the handling of the paste is working fine. So what else can we do? Are we done? Almost. We just need to handle or basically improve the accessibility of our input box. So what we can do is basically, I can do an arrow right, arrow left, arrow up and down, up and down. But I expect it to basically focus on the previous element. Or for example, I'm here, I'm going to press right. It should go to this one. So in action, you can see like, I'm using my arrow keys to basically go through the input boxes. So we want to implement that as well. So we can handle that in the key down. So as you can see, we already have the key down event to check that we are pressing backspace. So what is the key for the arrow keys? Let me just show you in the console log. So we can have the arrow right, left, up, and down. So these are the keys that we need to check. So we can add the check. We can add it here. Key. Can basically get the key now in the from the event using deconstruction. Key. Then we can replace this. Is equal to arrow right, and arrow right is basically just the same as the arrow down behavior. So we want to basically, since this, when you do the arrow right and arrow left, this is a default browser behavior, and we want to prevent that. To prevent that, you can use event prevent default. Okay, so what do you do now? So basically, you want to, when we press arrow right, we should go to the next element, and we have this function. We know this is the function, right? And I just want to reduce the duplication. I don't want to add it here again. It just duplicates the code. So I want to create a function on top here. Focus to next input. I accept a target input element. And we also add the focus to the previous element. Again, it will be the same one, but instead of next, it will be the previous element sibling. Okay, so now we can do some refactoring here. We can just do target. We can also do a target focus to previous input target. And here we can do a return focus to next Focus to next input. So we're doing a return so that it doesn't need to run the code below. Okay, so we can just copy this for arrow left and arrow up. Focus to previous input. Okay, I think we're done right here. Yeah, we can test this out. So I'm going to test this again, and I'm going to press arrow left. Boom, there you go. It's working fine. I'm pressing arrow left, arrow right, up, down, and yeah. So I actually forgot one more thing. I actually forgot to replace max length with value length here. So in this case, our input box will be dynamic. So whatever we change the value length here, that will be reflected on the input box as well. We can only paste 6 digits. So yeah, don't forget to add that part to basically replace the max length with the value length. That is all. I think that is it. You basically built your own OTP input with a great user experience. If you want to test this out in your mobile as well, you can do so. It will show you the keyboard, mobile keyboard with the numbers only. It won't display the alphabet. And also if you receive an SMS with the input codes, it will suggest to you as well if you're focused on the input box. So that's great. So we are actually done now in the implementation part. You can proceed to watch the next video to, learn how to write tests for this OTP input component. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye.